The problem with echo chambers is that every now and then an individual makes it inside that wasn't fully vetted on the way through, to make sure they had the right opinions. When this occurs in leftist circles, it's often because certain assumptions are made about said individual's identity. For example, if you're gay, you must be for gay marriage. And if you're trans, then surely you must be in favour of demanding people use your preferred pronouns. And if you're Indigenous, well then, you're expected to act like a victim and be treated as such, and therefore you couldn't possibly approve of the white supremacist concept of Australia Day. So a quick recap for non-Australians. On the 26th of January 1788, Captain Arthur Phillip rowed ashore in Sydney Cove and took possession of the land in the name of King George III. Now, some Indigenous communities and many more guilt-ridden white Australians refer to Australia Day as Invasion Day or Survival Day as a symbol of the adverse impacts of British settlement on Australia's Indigenous people. And protests are regularly held every year on Australia Day, and a call to change the day from January 26th to another day. Now, a recent poll by McNair found that just 15% of all Australians want to change the day, and that includes 54% of Indigenous Australians that want to change. But the taxpayer-funded Australian Broadcasting Commission is of the opinion that momentum is building to change the date out of respect for Indigenous Australians, many of whom view 26th of January as Invasion Day. Just a couple of months earlier, prominent Indigenous leader Noel Pearson described the ABC as a fundamentally racist organisation content to see Aboriginal people languish in poverty in order to wallow in hand-wringing reports of misery, incarceration and tragedy. They need blacks to remain alienated and incarcerated, leading short lives of grief and tribulation, because if it were not so, against whom would they direct their soft bigotry of low expectations? And that's exactly right. The ABC is at the forefront of pushing victim narratives to the public, regularly inviting selected victims on their shows to push that narrative. But sometimes it doesn't go according to plan.
Dr. Anthony Dillon is a lecturer in positive psychology and education at the Australian Catholic University. He identifies as an Aboriginal Australian and doesn't think the date needs to change. Dr. Dillon is here with me now. Thank you for coming in. Can you please tell us why your position is not to change the date?
Because I think there are bigger issues for Aboriginal people to deal with.
All right, and so I suppose you do see, though, that there have been thousands of people out on the streets around the country today saying that the very date of this national holiday actually does provoke quite strong emotions in them. What would be the downside to accommodating those emotions and changing the date?
Well, first of all, it's hard to miss them, so yes, we've seen them. I do question the sincerity of those emotions, and I base that on the fact that while they're out there protesting, we don't see anywhere near the number of people protesting about the issues happening today, like child abuse, poverty, violence, unclean, unsafe communities. So that's why I question their sincerity.
Now that was the sound of a truth bomb falling on a victim narrative and exploding it to pieces. And he's spot on. Changing Australia Day won't help address any of the real problems facing Aboriginal communities today. High levels of incarceration and violence, low levels of education and employment.
Can I ask, do you celebrate Australia Day?
Yes, I do. Not in a big way, but I just take the time to, reflect on what happened all those years ago. I don't dwell on it. I certainly don't make it an excuse for my emotion today. But I also partake in fellowship with friends on, just what a great country Australia is.
Now that's probably one of the most important lessons for the victim class to learn. Not to use the past to justify your emotions today.
But surely we're looking at some of the pictures from the marches today. You're not saying that all of the people that have participated in these marches are turning their backs on the other issues which are facing Indigenous Australians today.
Well, I would like to hear from them what are their priorities, and I would ask them, how do you think marching is going to solve the more serious problems that are happening in 2017?
The Prime Minister's own Indigenous advisor, Warren Mundine, supports a date change, saying that the date marks Indigenous people being massacred and losing their lands. You don't have any support for that view?
No, I disagree with Warren. As much as I respect him, I disagree with him on that view.
Oh, you can just feel the awkwardness. Now, for those that don't know, Warren Mundine is definitely not a member of the victim class. He's a very straight shooter and often talks openly and honestly about problems in Indigenous communities. And that's probably one of the reasons that we heard yesterday that he and the Prime Minister's Indigenous Advisory Council have been axed.
All right. Well, we will leave it there. Dr. Anthony Dillon, thank you very much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Now, to be fair, they did invite him on knowing that he opposed changing the date of Australia Day. But the interviewer didn't expect him to call into question the sincerity of the protesters, because that goes against one of the rules of victim coddling. They can do no wrong, and therefore their intentions cannot be questioned. But that's the danger when you don't fully vet guests into the echo chamber. They stray outside the scope of prescribed opinion. Maybe we won't be seeing Dr. Anthony Dillon on the ABC again anytime soon. And don't forget, if you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, or consider supporting me on Patreon. See you next time.